Welcome to our product training video of Yokogawa's DAQStandard software. You can use this to build configurations or alter configurations of our leading line of video recorders such as the DX Advanced, DX, and MV products. So let's get going here. I'm going to go to DAQStandard in my programs and hit the launcher button here. Okay, one thing that you noticed is it did a quick thing like I automatically connected, and let's see what would happen on your first starting up of this. If you didn't have an IP address in here, and this is generally what I would recommend that you have, then it wouldn't have automatically connected. It would have kind of paused at this screen for a second. The reason I say not to have anything in here is if you're in a situation where you're not connected to the actual unit, then if there's an IP address in here and it tries to connect to it, it may be waiting a while to time out to get you in. But if it leaves it blank, it'll just automatically take you to this screen. And if you want to do some offline work, then just leave it blank, hit OK, and it won't try to connect at all, and it's going to take you straight to the this little menu item over here where you can pick config. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this blank for now, and I'm going to go OK. It's going to bring me over here, and I'm going to pick config. Now this is where you can build from scratch or edit existing configurations for DXs. And if you're doing one from scratch, then the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go over here and you're going to go system configuration, and you're going to pick exactly the type of unit you want to build up. So everything from the MV Advanced to the DX, CX, FX, and DX Advanced. So say we were doing something like a DX, we'd go over here, pick the model number of it, how many channels, what style it is, that should be on the plate, and any of these other options, like if it has field bus or 485 option, if it's got the zip drive, floppy disk drive, or all the modern ones ship with this ATA. That's kind of the compact flash card on it. How many alarm point options you bought it with, whether you've got that special fail relay on it, if you're doing remotes or CU10s, like basically any of the other systems here, as well as if you have any special tokachus, which is kind of the Japanese word for options. So once you have all that picked out, you can just go OK and OK again, and it's going to let you start setting up from scratch here. So instead of working with this kind of unknown product here, I'm going to show you something extra on how to actually import a configuration, which is what I'd recommend. And so we'll just close this. We're not going to save the changes, and we're going to go over here to network. We're going to put in the address of one that I currently have hooked up. I'm going to go OK. You're going to see that it connects. Then I'm going to open configuration here, and I'm going to go COM receive settings. This is going to go out to the unit and suck in its base hardware configuration as well as any code that might actually be in the unit itself. Alright, so you can see that I've got a looks like a 30 channel unit here. Looks like I've got some math set up in it. I've got those external channels for communications. I've got all my basic settings, but most importantly, I have all the proper hardware options for this unit, so I'm not kind of guessing what they are. So this is what I recommended. You can either do it by hooking the unit up via network and putting an IP address in it through the faceplate and then doing this connection, or if you have a crossover Ethernet cable, you could go ahead and do this as well. But let's go through and take a quick look at how you configure stuff. So first thing I do is I go over to setup here, and I take a look to make sure that I'm going to have the right temperature in here. This is kind of the basis whenever dealing with the DX Advanced before I start getting heavily into configuration, is whether it's going to be temperature is C or F, because this can really affect a lot of how the actual unit works and can wipe out various calculations if you decide to change it midway. So I would definitely look to set this C or F at the beginning. But once you do that, you can then run over here to measurement and start putting in all the specifics on your unit. So you can pick from any of the modes. You can pick whether you want to do something like delta, which is essentially the difference between two channels, or just scale a specific channel, which is usually the most common. If you're doing some type of flow, you can do square root extraction. For example, if I pick this delta over here, then we can suddenly see that the reference channel, essentially the one I want to create a difference for, like say I'm doing a junction compensation for a thermocouple, so I have two thermocouples. One is kind of for my junction, the other is off the point where I'm measuring. I can now go ahead and pick my reference channel to do that difference. But let's move it back to scale here. Also, you can do log if it's some type of logarithmic type channel. And if it's a digital input, then I'm going to essentially get the level or contact. Those are the typical ones available for that. If I go to volt, then I'm going to get the various choices for volt. And 6 volt is usually what we're seeing for most like 1 to 5 volt type signals. And as we can see down here on channel 2, that's how that input is specified. Okay, so there's your span. I'm looking at 1 as my lower and 5 as my upper. You go over here, how many decimal points you want. And then over here, we're going to say, well, 1 equals 0 and 5 equals 52 on my scale. All right, so when I'm looking at a trend or a bar graph, that's going to be my lower and upper corresponding to my 1 and my 5. If you got any log stuff going on, you fill in here. You can go ahead and put in a unit here. As far as alarms, you can have up to 4 alarms per channel. You can go ahead and fill these in here. So we can see that we've got essentially 6 different types of alarms. We got high, so if you exceed that value, it'll be a high alarm. Low, if you go below that value, you get a low. You get a rate high, rate low for rate of change type alarms. And then down here we get time delay high, time delay low. So 6 different types of alarms for a measurement channel. Then you can go in here and put in the specific value. So we can see down here we got a time delay high alarm, and we can see that it's 200 on it. We can also select what relay I want to trigger. So here's some relays here. Looks like this unit has 2 relays, physical relays on the back that we can close. And it's also, if we scale down a little bit here, we can see that we've got switches we can close as well. You could just think of switches as internal memory bits that we can play with, that we could use in events, or we could use in math logic. So instead of turning a physical relay on and off, we could actually turn an internal memory bit on and off, which we could use somewhere else. Okay, and then there's your alarm 2, alarm 3, alarm 4, so we can certainly put in a lot of different alarms. There's your alarm delay that you can have for each one of them. You can put a mark for each one of those alarms if you wanted to on your screen. If you want to do stuff like moving averages, you can go down here and pick off or 16 if you're doing a moving average type on that specific tag or point. Okay, we've also got other things here, like you can go ahead and name each of your tags. So if you choose to display by tag, then you're going to get to see what's in here, or if you just get to display by channel, then you're going to get what's over here as its name. Okay, as far as where it's going to show up on a trend or something like that, you can say 0 to 100, which basically means I'm going to show my trend 0 to 100% of the entire trend that I'm showing up there. Or you could decide I only want to show it within a portion of the on-screen trend, and then you can essentially put that in here. Alright, so you could have one from 0 to 10, the next one from 11 to 20, so you can essentially break up your trend lines. And then over here we can take a look. We've got bar graph, scale, we've got some choices on positioning there, as well as the different types of scale available for it. Alright, over here we've got something interesting. This allows you to essentially split up how you're looking at a value. So if I were to go ahead and turn on this partial, then what would happen is it's looking for how much I want to see above the boundary, how many I want to see below the boundary. So say this here is 50. If I have a -6 to +6 volt scale, then at 0 volts here, or right in the middle, you're going to see 50% below the boundary, 50% above the boundary. But if I were to do something like this, 30, then we're going to see 30% of the scale below and 70% above. So essentially -6 to 0 volts is going to get 30% of the screen real estate, and 0 to plus 6 volts is going to get 70% of the screen real estate. Okay, so I'm just going to flip that back to 50 here, and moving right along, we have what type of color we want that to appear on the screen. If we want banding, inside or outside, what color of the band. Okay, and then we can also say, you know, L%, lower percent, upper percent of that specific band. Okay, moving right along, we can run over here to math. If you want math to be active, you got to turn it on, so you got to click here. You also have to buy a unit that actually has the math option. So if you downloaded your configuration from a unit and you don't have access to math, you probably don't have math turned on, which isn't a problem, because you can go to your salesperson and ask to turn that on. It's a software setting in there. There may be a charge for the upgrade to math capabilities, but once you're in here, you can do that. So once again, like the other page, you can go across, set everything in it, or what's also neat here is you can go over here and double click on just the number and bring up all the specifics on that unit. Now, why I like to do this is I can then click on operations here, and I can get access to all the specific syntax for setting up a math expression in case there's some that I don't know. All right, so let me close out this. All right, and just like the other one, we can see we've got how many decimal points. We can see a lower and upper span, unit. If we want to do alarms, we can do that. If we take a look at the alarm types, though, you can see we only have 4 types: high, low, time delay high, time delay low. Okay, and the reason we have this is you can essentially use math to do your own rate of change if you wanted to do that. Okay, but going across, everything else looks the same. We got our alarm delay, T-log, that's if you're doing any of the T-log type computations, rolling averages, tag names, and there's that partial boundary again, and green band. And then the other thing in this configuration that happens to come up is external channels. If you have a unit that supports external channels, which once again is an option that can be turned on in some units, these are units that you can fill with communications from external devices. Okay, and they're going to have the exact same type of stuff that you can set up on the other stuff. Okay, and then we're moving along to something new here. We're going to see here's some setting screens. So this is us configuring, you know, what you're going to actually see on your display. So you can go here, take a look at your update interval. You got some choices going on there. How often you want to save that display data. Okay. And if you got a second interval, you can do that. Okay, for your trend graph, horizontal, vertical, you've got your choices there. Bar graph, horizontal or vertical. Background color, white or black. Trend line width, if you want to make it bigger or not. You've got stuff like your grid divisions, how often you want to auto scroll, whether the scale of your digit is normal and fine. If you want to change the brightness of your unit, some go 1 to 4, some go 1 to 6. If you want to use your backlight saver, what the delay is on that backlight saver. What's going to restore? Is it going to be a key or a key and alarm? If you want the unit to jump to a default display after a while, you can do that here. If you're into doing messages on your unit, this is where you can set up the various messages that can be inserted into your unit. If you want to have a specific file name when you're saving off your files, you can go down here and set them up, as well as the directory that you're going to pop it in. Okay, moving along, you can set up various groups as well as trip lines for those groups, and you can put in your own custom name here. You can go and select your channels there. Okay, your math channels over here, and you've got, looks like about, wow, 23 groups on this specific unit. All right, so you can really mix things up. Over here, how you want to view stuff, you've got up to 4 different view groups, so you can go ahead and mix and match your different view groups. Okay. User key, you can define what you want your user key to do. A lot of people use it for alarm acknowledgement. Okay, but you could also do it for some of these other things, like a manual sample or inserting a message into the data file, or maybe even just taking a snapshot of the screen, which you could automatically send via FTP off to a PC running printwave, and which will automatically take that snapshot and send it off to a printer. So there's a good way to get a hard copy of the screen, completely automated. The only thing you need to do is hit the button there. Okay. If you're doing a batch application, you can go in here, put in name, supervisor name, manager name, batch number, lot number, information like that. If you want to auto increment the batch number, okay, data display information, time or batch. Okay, moving along. If you're going to do daylight savings time, this is where you could set it up here. Set your start time and your end time. Turn it on. Here's more stuff on the batch. Okay, looks like it's just taking us back to that user key screen. I guess that's a dual screen. And then we're going to move on to, this is the deeper stuff within the unit here. This is your setup. So once again, you can set up how you want to do your alarms. You know, whether you want reverse acting or direct acting, de-energize, energize, just depends on how you want your alarm to work. Whether you want to have an AND action there on your relay. Also reflash. Reflash, essentially, say you're in alarm. If another alarm comes in and reflash is turned on, what it'll do is it'll momentarily say disable the alarm and then pop it back on just for a second. Just so, say you have a horn hooked up to it and that's hooked up to a relay, the relay will actually change state for, you know, a couple milliseconds, just to kind of give you a visual or audio type change coming off that relay, just to let you know another alarm came in. All right. Then we've got different states here, like alarm relay behavior. You know, do I want it to hold or unhold, which essentially means if I was an alarm, now I'm out of alarm, the system will essentially make like the alarm didn't exist. You know, so we'll no longer see an alarm icon blinking on the screen. We'll no longer see something like the tag name blinking to let you know it was an alarm. Okay. Hold, it'll actually, you know, drop out of alarm, but it'll still kind of hold that relay on there just to say, hey, I was an alarm and I need you to acknowledge me to clear it. Okay. And then alarm indicator, that's kind of the same thing as the relay, but it's just a display indication. So you can either hold the display indication to say, hey, I was an alarm, or you can unhold it, which basically means the alarm indicator will go away once the alarm clears up on its own. Okay. If we're doing rate of change alarms, here you can do the increase, here you can do the decrease. If you want a little hysteresis, you can go ahead and turn it on here. Okay. As far as for remote, these are the various options for remote triggers. Okay, that's with the remote option that you buy with the unit. Moving next, scan intervals. You can, in this unit, it's got a choice of 1 second or 2 seconds. That's how often it's going to scan its measurement points. Up here, if you happen to be in the United States, you're going to go ahead and pick 60 Hertz there. All right. As far as memory, what type of sampling are you doing? We've got two different types of data. We have display, which is essentially recording the types of data that you see on the screen. We also have event and display. So if you've created an event in here that will collect data at the event rate, that'll create an event file. So this is event and display, that's just display, and of course you can just have event data as well. Memory sample, you can have it auto. Manual basically means you just got to turn it on and off. Okay. And here down here, if you happen to pick event, then you get to say, well, how often do I want to sample the event? So you get a few more options once you start with the event data. All right. So we'll leave it on that to give us all the answers, all the options. And event sampling mode, we got trigger, which means some type of trigger that you can set up has to happen, or rotate, which basically means that it just kind of continuously goes through that sampling. Okay, what we have is block 1 through 4, data length, how much we want there. Okay, pre-trigger length. Essentially, this is how much percent of the data do we save before the trigger, how much percent after. So 50-50. You know, that would basically mean that 50% of the data is in the data file for the event is going to be before the event occurred and 50% after. okay? And then you can have 5% before, 95% after, stuff like that, okay? So that's the pre-trigger length. Manual trigger, if you want to do that. An external trigger, alarm trigger, so you got some different types of triggers that can do this. You can also say over here, these are the points I want to be sampling. Okay. Let's see, memory time up. This is another type of thing you could use. Hour, day, week, okay. That could be another type of trigger. Okay. Down here under channel, you can set your burnouts, your junction compensation. If you got some type of security on the system, you can lock out the keys here. Key lock. All right. So you can say what can happen without putting in the code, and like here, or what can happen once you enter in the code. You'll start to get to use some of these things, and here's some other stuff that you can lock up or free. So free means no password, you get to do them. Lock, essentially, once you put in the password, you can do all the things that are locked. If you want to do full logins, you can go ahead and put in here. That way they're going to have to put in their username and their password. You want to do timers for stuff like your T-logs or events. This is where you can set them up. You can do absolute or relative, what you want to do at the end, reset, okay, what your interval is. You get 3 different timers on this particular unit. Report, if you have the report option, once again, this is something that can be turned on if you didn't happen to buy it with your unit. Okay, and you can pick your channels, how you want to sum them, stuff like that. How often you want to do your report up here. Switch action. So remember those switches that we could set instead of a relay? Well, if some of those switches go active, you can do certain actions off them, all right? As well as put a message into the data file. Temperature, we're back to here. Remember, CRF Vital, do it at the beginning. Log scale, 2 or 3 digits. Setting your time zone, I'd recommend doing this because if somebody happens to get your data file and their PC is in a different time zone, then the data could be shifted inappropriately. So, set this to your time zone so that when they see it on another unit, that it shows up properly, including your own PC that happens to be in the same time zone. Okay, this is where we get to say, do I want to use a tag name or the channel number? If I'm going to run out of data, say in my compact flash where all the data is being logged, I can send an alarm, and here's some of the things that I can have. Basically 1 hour before I run out of data, 100 hours before I run out of data. I can also set what language I want to see everything in. Let's see down here. I got other stuff. Probably the most important of these is going to be your media FIFO. Essentially what this means is if I choose to use it, then what I'll try to do is when I'm storing data, I'm always going to try and store the latest data. And if I run out of room on the card, instead of just kind of losing that new data, what I'll do is I'll delete my oldest file. So I'll always have, say it's a 2 gig card, the latest 2 gigs worth of data in there. All right, moving along. Here's network setup. Now, these pages in the DAQ standard configuration, it's good for seeing what's in the unit since we downloaded it. It's not so good for setting it because I can change all the stuff here and then try and push it down into the unit. But the unit, for security reasons, doesn't allow you to change a lot of network stuff through remote settings. So what we're seeing here is kind of how the unit is currently configured. If I want to actually change a lot of this stuff, it's best to go directly into the unit through the keypad on it and set these. But let's take a look at what we've got configured in here. We got IP address, subnet mask, default gateway if I happen to be using those. If I need to do a domain name server to find stuff by name, I can put that information in here. If I want to do stuff like timeouts or keep alive on my network connection, I can do that here. Moving on, FTP. This is a great option. Like, should you choose to want to automatically send data out to a system, I put in the IP address of my FTP server, which is the PC running my FTP server software. Port 21 is typically what you see for FTP. And then here is my login name, which happens to be my PC, and a user I created under my PC, as well as the password here. Account, PASV, I don't see that very often. dx//dx200. That's the name of the virtual directory I set up on my FTP server. And then down here I can say, well, what type of data do I want to send by FTP? I currently have them turned off. So if I actually wanted to start sending these files, I'd have to make sure they're both turned on. Okay, I can also set up a second FTP server. So I'll try this one. If I can't get to it, then I'll try this one. If I can't get to either of them, then I'll basically wait till the next file is available and I'll try sending it all again. If you have serial, this is where you can set up your serial configuration. If you happen to be speaking Modbus as a master, make sure you select down here, because by default it'll probably be over here at normal. And then right there is where you'd set up your Modbus address. Okay. All right, and then Modbus master, this is where you set up all your reads, writes, stuff like that. So read. In this unit it only supports reads, but in some units it supports writes. Reading it into communication register 1. Okay. First 101, last 120, so I'm actually trying to read a block. I'm trying to read it from device 1. Okay. And then over here I'm starting at register 30,001 on my slave, and I'm reading the data in as int type 16. I got a few different choices on what type of reads I can do in this one. And then as well, up here if we take a look, I can see how often I'm reading, what my timeout is, how many retries, if I want any interblock delay, if I want auto recovery, then I can pick how often I want to recover. Going further along, web, if I want to see web pages off of this unit, I turn them on. I can go down here, create page, command, access control, so I can set stuff specifically for the operator. If I just want monitor, I can go ahead and set stuff there, as well as usernames and passwords. Over here, email, if I'm going to use an email server, I put in, once again, the address of the email server, what port number I'm communicating to it. If there's going to be a recipient, which is basically the person that's going to get it. So the email server at this address is going to have TechVer as a user in there. So they're going to see stuff in here. Recipient 1, recipient 2, which is which line up here to actually use. Alarm 1. Okay. Include source URL so they can quickly find it. There's a little header there. Then I can do stuff like schedule, send them out periodically. System information. I can send out reports as well if I want. All right. And then down at the bottom here, if I'm going to do network time synchronization, this is where I do it. I'd go in here, set it up, put in the IP address of the unit. That's the port I'll be communicating to it. And another, like for example, DX Advanced could be your network time server if you want to use that. Okay. And so you set up these options for network time synchronization. So when all is said and done, I can go up here, go ahead and save. And then I just hit this button. I go send data. OK to send to connecting hardware. OK. And then it's going to go ahead and send it down to the unit. OK. The only other thing here is under communications. Say your unit's up and running. Well, then I can actually go in through here and remotely start and stop the math. So I'd stop the math and then send it. If, for example, it kicked back to me saying you can't send the data. Well, anything else you want to see? There's a nice help file on DAQStandard. It's a user manual, DXA in this case, 120, but you're going to be looking for the help manual for DAQStandard, and it goes through every one of these options in detail that I talked about, and that should get you going. And that's it. Look forward to a video on DX Viewer as our next for actually looking at the data files from one of our units. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.